Most products do not sell themselves. Salespeople bridge the gap between a product creation and a customer who purchases it. People can make a good living on the internet selling niche products, if they can find their customers. The process of taking a large group of potential customers and narrowing it down to only a subset of those customers who will buy your product is known as the sales funnel. The sales funnel consists of multiple stages, the first of which is known as prospecting. A salesperson doing prospecting is casting a wide net, sending emails to hundreds or thousands of people, looking for anyone who has some small probability of being interested. Without a tool for prospecting, the process can be very labor-intensive. Jean-Baptiste Escoyez is the CTO of Prospect.io, a tool for sales prospecting. In this episode, we explore the process of building Prospect.io, from the high-level product design to the engineering details of how it is implemented. I use Prospect.io to sell 2 different products, so this was enjoyable to find out how one of my favorite tools works, as well as to discuss the process of modern sales. Developers love Docker containers because they give applications portability and consistency all the way from your laptop to production. But things can get complicated fast when the time comes to deploy, manage, scale, and secure containerized apps in the cloud. Amazon EC2 Container Service from Amazon Web Services makes it easy to run Docker apps in production. With Amazon EC2 Container Service, installing, updating, operating, and scaling your infrastructure happens automatically. Using simple API calls, you can launch and stop Docker-enabled applications, query the state of your cluster, and natively integrate with powerful AWS services like security groups, elastic load balancing, EBS volumes, and more. Best of all, you only pay for the AWS compute and storage resources you use. With Amazon EC2 Container Service, you can focus on building apps, not spending time deploying, scaling, and managing your container infrastructure. It's time to get back to what you do best. Learn more about Amazon EC2 Container Service at ecs.aws today. That's the letters ecs.aws. JB Escoyez is the CTO of Prospect.io. JB, thanks for coming on Software Engineering Daily.
Thanks for having me on.
So today we're talking about building sales software. And sales is very important to me because I think that we're in a time where people are making a living selling very weird things on the internet. And they're able to make a living selling weird things because they can find the buyers on the internet. And, if we were talking about 10 or 20 years ago, it wouldn't be so easy to make a living selling something really strange on the internet. And so discussing how that type of commerce is facilitated, I think, is something I'd like to do with you. But first I want to ask you, why is sales important to you? Why is it important enough to be focused on building software that helps people do sales?
Actually, I think I have had several startups before working in Prospect.io. And in every startup, which were mainly focused on B2B business, I had to do some prospecting in some way, especially at the beginning when I had to find the first customers. So it was at a small scale and very targeted. And when it grows up, I needed to do prospecting at more important scale. So that's why I think it's really important.
Why don't you go ahead and define the term sales prospecting for people who are totally unfamiliar with this topic?
Sales prospecting is, I'd say, divide sales prospecting in 2 different parts. The first part is to target an audience. So choose who will be the customer, who are the people you will bring value with your product, and then find a way to get a list of information of contact information of those people. And then the second part is to reach them and to find the right words to get their attention so that they will be interested in your product.
Right. So it's typically, at least today, it is the process of one, building a list of prospects, like people who might want to buy your product or service, and then two, sending an email to those people. In the future, maybe it'll be you prospect through Facebook messages or LinkedIn or something, but most of it today is sales is done over email.
Yeah, exactly. And if you go back in time, sales prospecting has always been done. Before it was via cold calling, but people are kind of, especially in business, people are kind of fed up with being interrupted by cold calls, and cold emailing is a kind of new thing, and that works quite well, especially in a business environment.
So sales for me has been mostly selling podcast ads. I've also done some sales with this new startup that I'm working on, this advertising startup called Adforprize. And in order to understand how sales is done intelligently, I read a couple books about it. The most relevant book, and this is what everybody told me to read when I started doing sales and focusing on building a, quote, sales pipeline, was this book, Predictable Revenue, which maybe you've heard of. But anyway, Predictable Revenue talks about this idea of a sales pipeline, where basically whether you're talking about a small company or a big company, you have the idea of a sales pipeline. And
yeah, exactly.
Maybe at a small company, it might be one person that's doing every role in the sales pipeline. But at a larger company, you might have 5 or 6 different roles where you've got, hundreds of people in each role, like at a company like Salesforce that's doing tons of sales.
Yeah.
Explain what the sales pipeline is and how prospecting fits into that idea of a sales pipeline.
Actually, prospecting is the first part of the sales pipeline. So after having defined your strategy, which customer you are targeting, you will start to visit website, check on LinkedIn, I don't know, to buy listings or any way of getting the contact information of your prospects, and then you will feed your sales pipeline. Then the second part of prospecting will be to reach these people, because you have unverified contact information and you need at least some trigger that will underline that the people you are trying to contact is interested in your offers. And then you could bring that prospect to your CRM and continue. Once the contact is done, you can continue your commercial relationship in the CRM.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And when I started doing this like a year and a half ago or 2 years ago, when I started this podcast, I started selling podcast ads. Obviously, like anybody else getting started in sales, I was like, well, I must be the first person doing this. I'm just going to build everything in an Excel spreadsheet or like a list of Google Docs, and I'm going to take, 5 hours to build a list and then to get that list imported into Gmail so that I can send a large scale email. And it was just this broken process. And over the last 2 years, over time, I've just realized, actually, the process that I'm doing for sales, everybody does like something extremely similar, and there are tools that are written to help with this, and you don't have to do everything in an Excel spreadsheet. And it's been an interesting journey learning just how much tooling there is around sales. Because I'm an engineer by trade, and I of course knew how much there was tooling in developers. But I guess I was so naive because I didn't realize, there's just like a ton of tooling around sales also.
Yeah, that's crazy. Actually, there are tons of tools because it's just a huge market. Because absolutely everybody that has something to sell has to do sales prospecting in a way or another. And as you told me, it can really get boring and messy if you don't use a real tool, because in the first place, when you start prospecting, you don't really know who you are targeting. So you are doing some tests. It means that you will contact quite a lot of prospects, and following up with all of them can be quite hard, quite fast. Yeah, maybe that's why there are so many tools. Also because there are many different actions to do for prospecting, and some tools are more focused on finding leads. So you can just put some criteria on the type of company you try to reach, and the tool will automatically suggest you some people in companies to contact. The second part is finding contact information of those people, and the third part is contacting them by email or by phone for some.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Now, I want to eventually get to engineering. We will get to engineering. Most of the episodes that we do are much more focused on the engineering, but I want to talk a little bit more about product development with you, because what's so interesting about Prospect.io, and this is, by the way, it sounds like I'm making a pitch for your product because I use it, but it's not like you're a sponsor of the show or something. But it's just because it's one of these things where, you mess with different solutions for a really long time, and then finally you find the one that's like, oh my gosh, this is really useful for me. And that's kind of what Prospect.io has been for me for selling podcast ads, because it's almost like, when you find Dropbox and you're like, oh, finally, like the thing that solves my random file storage issue. So talking a little bit more about the product development process. So this is Prospect.io. It's really useful for me as somebody that's running a 2-person business. But I know there are people like Lyft and Cloudera and Box that are using it. So these companies have a much wider sales pipeline. They've got a lot more people involved in a given sales pipeline, I assume. So when you're talking about building a product for a small startup versus a large company like a Box or a Cloudera or a Lyft, I'm curious to know how you build something that fits both use cases, because this is kind of something that's interesting in SaaS recently, where you have the blurring of the lines between the enterprise and the individual entrepreneur in terms of what product you're selling to people. So I'm just very curious about how you satisfy both of those customer pockets.
Actually, I'd say the basic needs of a small or big team are the same, but for the big teams, they have to interact with many people, and I think that's why since we started building the product for small teams, the focus has been mainly on offering a good tool and a reliable tool to send email for one people. And then we started to add team features where several people can collaborate, and actually they get even more value, because you told me about the spreadsheet you had. Imagine that 10 people have to share the same spreadsheet. It's even more crazy. So with a tool like Prospect, you can see that, my colleague already contacted this prospect. This prospect has already been contacted 1 year ago. You have an history, and then it makes collaboration easier.
Right. And so when we're talking about, we may not have described Prospect.io very well to people, but to describe it, this is what's known as a CRM, which is, what is it, customer relationship management? Is that what that thing stands for?
Yeah, but yeah. I wouldn't describe Prospect as a CRM. To me, Prospect.io is the step before the CRM, and we have different integrations where the goal, when the prospects start to talk with you, we encourage you to push it into your CRM to continue the commercial relationship. So the prospect is really for the beginning of the relationship, and that's why I wouldn't call it a customer relationship management software. It's really a prospecting software, and the difference is small. I'd say all the prospecting part can be automated, quite a lot at least, but in the CRM, a CRM is mainly a database. There is not much that can be automated. You can just have notifications when people start replying, and you can add tasks. But in most CRMs, that's the main thing. So yeah.
Spring Framework gives developers an environment for building cloud-native projects. On December 4th through 7th, Spring One Platform is coming to San Francisco. Spring One Platform is a conference where developers congregate to explore the latest technologies in the Spring ecosystem and beyond. Speakers at Spring One Platform include Eric Brewer, who created the CAP theorem, Vaughn Vernon, who writes extensively about domain-driven design, and many thought leaders in the Spring ecosystem. Spring One Platform is the premier conference for those who build, deploy, and run cloud-native software. Software Engineering Daily listeners can sign up with the discount code SEDaily100 and receive $100 off of a Spring One Platform conference pass, while also supporting Software Engineering Daily. I will also be at Spring One reporting on developments in the cloud-native ecosystem. I would love to see you there and have a discussion with you. Join me December 4th through 7th at the Spring One Platform Conference and use discount code SEDaily100 for $100 off of your conference pass. That's SEDaily100, all one word, for the promo code. Thanks to Pivotal for organizing Spring One Platform and for sponsoring Software Engineering Daily. So in a CRM, it's like I'm a salesperson at an insurance company, and I've got 10,000 people who I'm have in different buckets, and these are my different relationships, and they're at different stages in the sales process, and a CRM is really good for maintaining the status of those different relationships. And I might use Salesforce, for example, to know the status of those different relationships. And Salesforce is sort of was maybe the first sales CRM, or the first really good sales CRM, or the first SaaS CRM perhaps. And I guess I guess they basically defined the term SaaS. But we tried Salesforce, and kind of one of the issues with Salesforce for us was like, okay, the bulk of the work for us is prospecting. It's not really, at least so far in our experience, it's been prospecting. It's not been like the upkeep of the relationships as much. Like, we kind of just need a little bit of information kept up around who our leads are and who the different people. And by the way, that term leads, that means people who you are looking at as a potential person you might make a sale to. But we didn't need a lot of the large-scale functionality of a CRM. I mean, what are the things? But this is actually an interesting conversation, because if you're saying that Prospect.io is mainly the step before the CRM, what do you choose not to do? What are the pieces of functionality that you can leave out of the equation and say, okay, you know what, this is something that the CRM is going to take care of?
Yeah, actually, the step where the CRM enters is when there is a relationship with the customer to manage. And in Prospect, you are mainly contacting people that you don't know, and that will hear about you for the first time. So it's for their step. And when the relationship starts, it means that when the prospects start replying, then the relationship can continue into the CRM, which has been made for that.
Okay, so to describe the tool to people a little bit more, and then we'll get into engineering. Basically, what you do with Prospect.io is it gives you a Chrome extension, and basically you can go around the internet to any website. Like if I want to go to, let's say, Oracle, you could go to oracle.com and click on this Prospect.io Chrome extension, and then it's going to bring you up a list of people that work at Oracle, and you can just save their email addresses, and you just click a one-click button and get their email address into the Prospect.io interface, and then you can go to your Prospect.io dashboard, and you've got a list of people who you have saved to Prospect.io, and then you can do different things with those contacts. You can add them to a list to send them an email and say, hey, do you want to buy some podcast ads, for example? And this Chrome extension also lets you go to LinkedIn, and you can look around LinkedIn, and it adds a little thing on the page next to all the contacts on LinkedIn, where if you want to prospect this person, you can click this purple button and get their email address, basically because a lot of people who are prospecting, they're looking at LinkedIn and they're trying to understand the org chart of a company because they want to know, okay, who's going to buy my widget machine, or who's going to buy my widget? Okay, maybe this person who uses widgets, like a widget engineer at Cloudera, for example. So how did you come upon that model as the right way to do prospecting? Because when I saw this one, I was like, oh my gosh, this is exactly what I do, except I have like 10 extra steps in my workflow, because like our workflow is something like, okay, we go to Oracle and then we find some other way of getting email addresses for people who work at Oracle, and it takes like literally 10 times as long as instead of like just clicking this purple button and then seeing a list of people who work at Oracle and then getting the email addresses from those people. How did you come upon the idea that was the ideal model for prospecting?
Yeah, that it's just because we were doing that manually before Prospect. So we did that, me and my associate Vincenzo. We did that many times in our different projects, and at some point we really thought it's boring. It takes too much time. We should automate that process. And then,
can I ask, by the way, what were you selling? What at your previous businesses, like when you were doing prospecting, what kinds of products were you selling?
I was working on a startup that were selling virtual credit cards. So it was a service for small businesses that needs to share their credit card with their employees. So that was a system with different credit limits and so on. So we were prospecting at a very early stage, since we were still building the product at that time. Yeah, and that. So it was already focused on B2B business.
So this is like perfect example, because this is like a niche product, but it's something that the people whose problem you're solving for that with the virtual credit card, they absolutely need that.
Yeah, absolutely. And then that's what we did. There were tons of startup listed on famous website like Crunchbase or AngelList or I don't know, and then we were clicking on every button and then trying to find the email, and then all that process manually was just cumbersome, and at some point we thought that we should do it differently.
Yeah. And just to reiterate, for anybody who is thinking right now, okay, so this is like people who build the spam tools. It kind of is like it's a weapon. It can be a weapon, this, when you're building these sales tools, these prospecting tools. But this is simply what you need if you're if you're trying to build a software business that sells something weird. Like, you're gonna need something like this. But I mean, you must think about that, right? Do you think about like how do you avoid building a tool that can be used as a weapon for spam?
So I think I think spam works when you send huge amounts of email. And with prospect, it's impossible to do that. Actually, you have to connect your own inbox. So if you start doing spam, if you get a bad reputation, it will impact your deliverability. So as a prospect customer, you have to take care about what you are doing with the tool. Otherwise, you will be punished, not by us, but by the spam filters on the internet. So, and on top of that, we limit the number of emails you can send every day, at least automatically with our system. So all the spam problem is handled outside of prospect, and moreover, if you work like crazy, we can imagine that you could send those 400 emails by yourself by copy pasting some emails you've done. So we are just making a work that you will maybe have outsourced to someone, but we are making it done by a machine.
Okay, let's get into engineering. Describe the architecture for Prospect.io.
Prospect.io is a monolithic application made of Rails. That's pretty interesting, actually. So we started Prospect with a monolithic Rails application, and we are transitioning the front part to Ember.js. And that has been one of our main technical challenge in the past 9 months. To transition view by view everything to Ember. And then we are hosted on Heroku, and we have an automatic code deployment with CodeShip. The code is hosted on GitHub. And for all the email sending part, that's also interesting. We are using the Gmail API, and we have recently introduced direct connection to SMTP servers.
So you mentioned you're migrating the front end to Ember. What's the front end built in right now?
So it was in Rails. It was classic Rails view rendered by the server, and now step by step we are moving views to Ember. The main part is already moved, and we still have to move the settings. And one of the most important piece of Ember will be released in the 2 next weeks, which is the list of prospects, which is the main view from where every main actions are done.
Talk about migrating a front end. We've done plenty of shows about migrating a back end, particularly like, you're migrating to microservices, but migrating a front end is a much different story. What are the reasons to do it, and why is it difficult?
Okay, so the main reason to do it was to have a single-page application, and having a single-page application means everything faster. So all the interactions are faster, and since the rendering has not have to be done on the server, the only thing that goes back and forth from your browser and the server is the JSON. So it's very light and much faster to render for the server. So moreover, all the transition between pages are almost instant. Because when you load the application, all the UI is loaded at the very beginning. So you can think of Gmail interface or Trello interface. Everything is so smooth. So we took this decision mainly for the UX. On top of that, switching to Ember allowed us to write an API in Rails. So 9 months ago, we realized that all the controllers were quite messy, and forcing us to rebuild all the controller part was really a good exercise that allowed us to clean up a lot of code and make our application much more robust.
So it sounds like migrating the front end made you rework a lot of components of the back end as well.
Yeah, but we already had a lot of things done in the back end that were not that shouldn't have that have not been rewritten. Just the glue between all our backend things and our application, all the view part from Rails has been rewritten. So it's still a huge work, but it allows really to separate view concerns from a backend concerns and have a clean API to transition data between the two.
You mentioned that you're on Heroku, you use CodeShip. Those are a pair of managed services. What are some other, do you use many other managed services? Like, how do you look at build versus buy? Because I find it interesting that you just use Heroku. You know, I know some people will say, okay, that's too much, you're putting too much trust in a platform as a service. You know, you should be configuring everything in AWS. But, you know, I love Heroku. I use it for most of my projects because it just simplifies. It's not that I don't know how to configure a load balancer. It's just that I don't really want to.
Yeah. You know, in 1 year and a half, because Prospect.io is only old 1 year and a half, we have grown to almost 700 customers. And it implied that we had to be focused on shipping at any time. And a managed service like Heroku really allowed us to not to focus on the hosting and the DevOps part. So we are really in a buy vs build mindset, and everything we can buy and offer us a return on investment, we do it.
And that seems to be the trend. Is if you're in anything but a commodity business, if you're in a SaaS business, you basically always should buy, because your margins on serving more customers are generally quite high in SaaS businesses.
Yeah, true. And moreover, Heroku flexibility allowed us to absorb a high server load. And for instance, we have a lot of traffic during the week and a lot less during the weekend. So the Heroku price the resources we allocate on Heroku change, and the price change too. So compared to a classical hosting solution, we couldn't do that, I think. Maybe on Amazon. No, even not sure. I don't think it's so easy to pin out dinos and cut them off.
Look for a job more efficiently with Indeed Prime. Indeed Prime flips the job search model and lets you find a job more efficiently even while you're busy with other engineering work or coding your side project. You simply upload your resume, and in one click, you get immediate exposure to companies like Facebook, Uber, and Dropbox. The employers that are interested will reach out to you within 1 week with salary, position, and equity up front. Don't let applying for jobs become a full-time job itself. With Indeed Prime, the jobs come to you. The average software developer gets 5 employer contacts and an average salary offer of $125,000 through Indeed Prime. It's 100% free for candidates. There are no strings attached. Sign up now at Indeed.com/SEDaily. Thank you to Indeed Prime for being a repeat sponsor of Software Engineering Daily. And if you want to support the show while looking for a new job, go to Indeed.com/SEDaily. Yeah, I think it's interesting that Heroku has continued to thrive, because I think, I feel like there was a narrative maybe 4 or 5 years ago, or maybe 3 or 4 years ago, that Heroku is just kind of a set of features that AWS is going to build, or Google can build, or Azure can build. but it's really proven to be a great company that has been quite durable. And I mean, people are still onboarding with Heroku because of its PaaS, all the time. But I don't know. Have you been surprised by the fact, like market wise, that it's just been such a durable product?
Yes, I thought at some point that Heroku could be built by in open source. In an open source way, you could spin out your own Heroku-like instance, and doing it. But it looks like on the long term, you cannot really do that because there are always a lot of maintenance to do, and I think we are paying for their reliability. I remember I started to use Heroku in 2012, and at that time it was not that reliable. I remember a 2 days outage. Actually, it was not the fault of Heroku because I think all AWS was down at the time. But over the years, the reliability increased and the service they offer increased too. They now have this deployment pipeline that we are not using, but because we have kind of special needs due to our front end separated from the back end. But I've used it on other projects, and it's really powerful, and they are doing more and more for teams to be able to collaborate. That's really impressive.
I should mention here that Heroku is a sponsor of Software Engineering Daily, but this is not like a planned pitch about Heroku because I actually use it. I want to talk a little bit about the data cleaning and email aggregation process, because when I go to oracle.com and I click that purple prospect.io button and it lists emails for me on the page that I can save to my prospect.io database, I know that list of emails is coming from somewhere. I assume it is a database that you keep internally at prospect.io. Can you talk about how you aggregate the email addresses in that database?
Yeah, I can. But actually, you have to know that we are subcontracting this part to a third party that offers an API. But I precisely know how do they gather this email. It's not a big secret. So our subcontractor, what do? You can think of them as a Google that index email addresses instead of web pages. So they have crawlers over the internet. When they find pages with email addresses, they get them. They organize them by domain name, and they try to find email patterns on them. So when you try to get an email from an email address from prospect, the first thing we do is to call this API that will return a result that they found on the internet, or that they have guessed from the pattern of that domain name. And then in the second time, we verify this email. So we do some check on the SMTP server to see if the email exists or not. And sometimes we have a clear answer: this email exists or does not exist. And sometimes we don't know. And that's why we have implemented. There is a settings in Prospect called verification settings, and you have different verifications filter that you can set depending on what level of confidence you want in the email address we give you.
I know that those third-party services for delivering email addresses and indexing these email addresses can be quite expensive. Is the expense of those a concern, or do you have an enterprise deal with them that gives you enough of a protection against your margin?
Yeah, we do. We do have an enterprise deal with them. We are quite close of them. We know them very well. We have really built a strong relationship with our provider. Yeah, and on top of it, there are other providers that could be used if something failed. But at the moment we are quite happy with our provider. So
when you make a request to this third-party provider that can index all the email addresses from a company that they've aggregated, like Oracle, for example, that has hundreds of thousands of employees, I think, or tens of thousands at least, do you save the requests? Do you cache the requests into your own database?
No, we don't. We don't. So we actually, what is important too is to have fresh results. So we want to give the best answer to our customers and ensure that everything is up to date. So that's why. But their API is very, very fast, and when you request an email through our system, we have the time to request to their API, process the result, and send you back the answer.
So when you said when you contact their API and you get those email addresses back, you do some checks on your side, right? You do like a check to make sure that it's like you try to check that it's verified, right? You said that?
Yeah.
So do you have to make a large series of requests to those SMTP servers to verify the email addresses even after the provider has returned the email addresses?
Yeah, but it's quite fast. When you use our extension, you can see that for most prospects, the answer takes more than 2 seconds the response takes more than 2 seconds to show up in the extension, and we send all the requests in parallel. So we send one first request to our provider, and then we verify all the emails returned in parallel, and we gather everything in one response. We send back to the extension so that you can see that everything went right.
Did you benchmark the data quality of this provider against other email aggregators?
No, we haven't did that yet. Actually, most of our customers are quite happy with the quality of the emails we give them. Mainly, we haven't done that because, as far as I know, I don't know a better way to find information that what they do. But
sure.
Maybe that's something I should go deeper. Yeah.
Sure. One thing I find interesting is sometimes if I'm looking for some leads to, again, sell podcast ads to or talk to about podcast ads, when I go to the website and use the data from the website, I get different results than if I go to LinkedIn and find prospects through LinkedIn. So it seems like whatever third-party data provider you're using, the email addresses that they have that join the LinkedIn contacts are sometimes different, or it's different or better data than the website contacts. Is that accurate? Does it seem like they have different indexes for LinkedIn contacts versus for website contacts?
No, they don't. But what you might experience if you go to a company website that has many employees, I think we only respond with the 20 result for the company. So you will see 20 random employees. It's the emails with the highest score. If you click on the button, if you go to the contact page, it will look at the code of the page to try to find emails in those pages. But on LinkedIn, you have the first name and the last name of the people you try to reach. So you will have more specific result, the one you are really looking for from your LinkedIn search.
So essentially, it's a different query against the same data provider's API.
Yeah, that's it.
Right. What I find interesting about this business is we've got these success stories and these failure stories of what happens when you build on top of another provider. So, we've already talked about a couple success stories. Heroku is built on Amazon, which is kind of I still consider kind of a new phenomenon, even though I guess cloud computing is like 10 or 12 years old at this point. And you've got a company like Prospect.io that's built on essentially on this third-party data API. There are also failure stories where like Zynga built on top of Facebook and
Yeah, true.
and kind of got nuked. Do you
Yeah.
have any
Yeah.
do you have any observations of this era that we're in? I mean, there's also Twilio. Twilio built on AWS and kind of built a new API. What are your observations about this era of software development where we have platforms and APIs that we can build off of so quickly?
I think it really depends on where you are positioned related to the provider. For instance, your example with Zynga and Facebook. Facebook was a way to deliver Zynga apps. So I'm not even sure that Zynga was really built on Facebook. Facebook was really surrounding Zynga because they helped them to sell and they provided the API and the building blocks for them. When you add a layer on top of a subcontractor, I think you are just adding value on top of what they do. And what we are really skilled at doing is to make a great product, and what our subcontractor do is providing great data, and that's why I think it's a kind of perfect match, because gathering that data is really a different job than building an awesome product. Moreover, there are, as I told before, there are different data providers. That's why.
You're not locked in.
Yeah, we are not locked in.
Interesting. Okay, well, I know we're drawing to the close of our time. I guess I just want to ask, to close off, from maybe you guys don't look at this, but you technically have access to macro data about what works well in terms of prospecting and what doesn't work. Have you seen any interesting overall trends that you can look at?
Actually, that's a very good question, because it's something we are starting to investigate just right now. Since 2 months, we are really focused. We have been focused on building a great product, and the product has improved a lot in the last months. And now we have something very stable, and we can take a bigger picture, and we are more and more focused on the success of our customers and how to help them to get better results. Because our first goal was to give them a tool to remove the boring part of their job, and now we want to help them to make their job better. And we are only scratching this part to try to find what works and what doesn't, and how to advise them on how to create great campaigns that really trigger the interest of the prospects. So we accept very general rules like short emails works well, or creating catchy email subjects, but not too obvious, triggering a curiosity and things like that, which are the things you can read on any blog about sales and marketing. We haven't dived enough into the data we have, but that's really the plan for the next months.
All right, last question. What can engineers learn from salespeople, and what can salespeople learn from engineers?
Salespeople can learn from engineers that salespeople really need data to do their job, and engineers can give them their data. And for the other side of the question, I think engineers are there to create a software that provides value to someone, and salespeople have a lot of skills to make this value visible. And talking together, I think salespeople can really give value to what engineers do.
I agree with you. And it's been interesting to learn sales since kind of leaving my role as an engineer. And so anyway, well, JB, I want to thank you for coming on the show. It's been really enjoyable to start using your tool, Prospect.io, and it's very fascinating talking to you about building a modern SaaS company.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure to be there with you and to discuss all these things.
Cloudflare runs 10% of the internet. boosting the performance and security of millions of websites. Many of you probably already use Cloudflare on your sites, but we're not talking about using Cloudflare today. We're talking about building on top of it. If you're a developer, you can build apps which can be installed by the millions of sites which rely on Cloudflare. You can even sell your apps. They can make you money every month. Your users can log in or register to your service inside your app. They can get a real-time preview of your tool live on their site, and they can start paying you monthly, all from within Cloudflare apps. They can go from never having heard of you or your service to having it installed on their site and paying you in seconds. Visit cloudflare.com/sedaily to watch how you can build and deploy an app in less than 3 minutes. That's cloudflare.com/sedaily. Thank you to Cloudflare for being a new sponsor of Software Engineering Daily.
Wow!